Hello, welcome to the channel Why Stories. Enjoy watching.
Andres Trujillo has had quite a successful career in his 30s. After graduating from the University of Law, he worked as a federal judge's assistant, pondering whether to tie his life to the legal profession or to try something else. An opportunity came up. His friend became a notary public and offered him an internship as his assistant. Andres felt more comfortable with this job. The services of the notary in his city were usually used for processing inheritance documents, and he had to deal with innocent old people. Sometimes he had to visit them at home. The job seemed easy and quite interesting. 3 years ago, Mr. Trujillo opened his own notary's office, renting an office downtown. He hired an assistant, Irene Dominquez, a middle-aged woman with great professional and life experience. In addition, she took care of the accounting. "How many more people are there?" Andres asked, glancing at his watch as the secretary brought the papers for the signature of the elderly man sitting across from the notary. "Just one visitor." Irene stepped closer and whispered, "There's some tramp, and she's mute." "What does she want?" Andres raised his eyebrows in surprise. "She wrote on a piece of paper that she needs to make a will." "Does she have any documents?" "She says she wants to discuss it with you in person." When the elderly man left, a hunched woman of indeterminate age, wearing a long black shabby velvet coat with a hood over her head, walked awkwardly into the office. Her face, with its massive square chin, was framed by gray curly hair, and her eyes were covered by massive glasses with dirty lenses. "Good evening, please take a seat," Andres said louder than usual, though the assistant didn't say the woman couldn't hear well. "Do you want to make a will?" The visitor nodded and handed him a slightly crumpled sheet of paper. The notary carefully unfolded it and placed it in front of him. It was a handwritten text. "I, Eduardo Sierra, bequeath all my property to my son, Andres Trujillo." A chill crawled down the notary's back and his throat went dry. He was afraid to raise his eyes to his visitor. "Hello, son, I'm your daddy," she said in a hoarse-bass voice. And that voice sent fear through the young man's entire body. Andres forced himself to take his eyes off the paper and look at the person sitting across from him. "Do you recognize me now?" The tramp took off her hood, along with the wig and glasses, in one fell swoop. "I'm sick of this masquerade, but I couldn't come here without it." Andres saw a different face, a face he wanted to forget forever, but sometimes saw this face in his nightmares. The face of a violent man, a criminal who appeared in his life again after 20 years. So he wasn't dead, as everyone thought at the time. "You will help me get my money back and punish my enemies," said the man in a woman's shabby velvet coat, and then said in a very different, softer tone, that made a chill run down Andres' spine. "I won't hurt you, you're my son, my heir. I don't want anything from you." Andres still couldn't believe his eyes. "Well, you're already living in my house, which I purchased for your mother. You're using my inheritance." A father, who had appeared so suddenly, grinned. "Where do you think your mother got the money to start the business?" "She's got my money, too. She's a smart bitch." "Well, if you don't want my money, just help me get rid of my enemies." "And if I refuse?" Andres had the will and strength to say those words. "Weakling. You have inherited nothing from me," Father hissed quietly. "If I didn't know for sure you are my son, I would have doubts by now." And then he barked, "You have no choice." He got up from his chair, and with his shoulders straight, he leaned over the table like a rock. "I need this, and you should obey. I guess you love your mommy and you don't want her to get hurt, do you?" Andres' stomach clenched. "Tomorrow is your day off. I checked your schedule while I was waiting in line. How come you're a notary? Couldn't you find something better to do?" "Well, I'll hide my disappointment. Tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock, I'll meet you at the Galaxy Mall, 2nd floor, French coffee shop. Don't be late, son. I don't think I need to warn you that this conversation, like all the others, is strictly between you and me." And don't even try to play with me or stop me. It will be worse for you and your mother. His father took his will, pulled his wig and hood over his head, put on his glasses, and left the office. Andres remained seated as if pinned to his chair. "Mr. Andres, what did the mute tramp want?" Irene asked after a moment. "Oh, nothing," the notary answered, coming out of his stupor. "A sick person who doesn't even have any documents. So you don't need me today?" "No, you can go. I will close the office myself." Andres' thoughts were jumbled, and he tried to organize them somehow. What did this father, who had appeared so suddenly and frightened me, want from his son? Who would he want to get revenge on? I don't want to be his accomplice. But what should I do? Go to the police? But wouldn't that make it worse? And what could I tell the police? A mute tramp came to make a will and turned out to be the notary's father? Sounds like a joke. But only to those who don't know this person. And yet 20 years ago he was presumed dead, and Andres actually tried to forget that he ever had a father. 3 years of his childhood was enough for him to realize how dangerous he was. And, apparently, his mind did its best to suppress the memories of his biological father, hiding them in the deepest recesses. Andres was 7 when his peaceful life changed abruptly. For as long as the boy could remember, he had lived with his mother, Marina, in a comfortable apartment. He knew that his mother loved him very much, and he tried not to upset her in any way. But sometimes he heard her crying at night, and then he thought that he had done something wrong. Only in the morning she would smile at him again, kiss him on the forehead, feed him breakfast, and take him to kindergarten. Occasionally, she would take her son to Grandma Emma in the village for a few days. Grandma didn't really like babysitting Andres. Often she could criticize him for any trifle, whether he brushed his hair badly or tucked his shirt in the wrong way. She treated Andres' cousins better, he could see that. And when they all misbehaved together and did something wrong, Grandma would scold only him. Grandma Emma never believed Andres was innocent. "The apple doesn't fall far from the tree," she used to say reproachfully. But then the boy could not understand the meaning of these words. He was simply offended because it sounded extremely unpleasant. When his mother came to pick him up, he was the happiest kid in the world, and he was happy to come home. He liked their life together. Only once his mother told him that his father was coming soon. Earlier she said he was on a business trip, and Andres never asked anything else. He felt that talking about his father made his mother uncomfortable. "Is he good?" the boy finally decided to ask this time. "We'll see," she answered with a sigh. The father appeared on the threshold of their apartment with a large bag and immediately took out the game console and handed it to Andres. "Well, son, I'm your daddy," he said in a husky bass voice. "We'll live together now." His father hugged his mom. The boy could see that she was trying her best to smile, but he felt that she was not happy, it was not sincere. But his new father didn't seem to notice that. He immediately began to be bossy and behave like a master in their apartment. And Mom obediently fulfilled all his requests. That evening some friends came to visit him. Marina set the table, and Sierra told Andres not to leave his room. But the boy didn't want to leave his room. He had a new console and started playing wearing his headphones. When he came out of his room, the guests had already left. His father had also left, and his mother was crying as she put the dishes away. "What happened?" the boy asked. "Everything is all right." Mom wiped away her tears and smiled. "Will you have dinner?" She hugged and kissed her son. And then, a few days later, they moved into a large private house in a new area of the city, with a garden and neat walkways. There was even a pool with a water heating system, and Andres enjoyed swimming. Mom now had a new car, and she drove her son to school and picked him up after school. Dad was rarely home. He could disappear for a few days and then suddenly show up. Mom was very different when he was there, like a robot with a computer program on, telling her to smile and fulfill all the father's requests. And when he was away, Andres could see her in tears. He still took those tears personally, thinking that he had done something wrong, that he had upset her in some way. Until one day he witnessed his father beating his mother. Andres was in his room on the second floor of the new house when he heard some noise downstairs in the dining room. When he came down the stairs, he saw his angry father. He hit his mother and pushed her so that she fell to the floor. The boy rushed to his mother, and his father roughly grabbed him by the shoulders and threw him on the couch. He cursed with such profanities that Andres had never heard before. After this incident, he finally realized why his mother was crying, that it was only his father's fault. But he did not know how to protect the dearest and most beloved person. "Let's run away from him," he suggested to his mother after another scandal when his father left, and she was sitting in an armchair, staring indifferently at her hands. "Where to?" She looked up with tear-filled eyes. "He or his friends will find us always and everywhere. He won't leave us alone." Andres was frightened by this hopelessness. "Everything will get better, my son," Mom promised. And indeed, there was a moment of peace for a while. Dad behaved as if nothing had happened, bringing gifts to both Mom and Andres. But no matter how much the boy liked what he got from his father, it was better not to have him at all. When the boy heard his parents quarreling again, he rushed to his mother and stood between them, seeing that his father was about to hit her. "Not in front of the child," the mother asked quietly. Suddenly this cooled the father's anger, and he stopped, breathing heavily. "You don't want me to hurt your mommy?" he asked calmly. And the boy nodded eagerly. "Then be a good son, obey me in everything, promise?" Andres nodded again. "Deal. And I will keep my word." And in fact, he never touched his mother again after that. The boy had no idea what exactly he had to do to be a good son, so he just tried to do everything his father asked him to do. It was something minor, like bringing a bottle of beer from the refrigerator or a newspaper. His father used to say that Andres had to do well in school. It was a good thing that his studies were easy for him, and when he showed his father his grades, he knew he would have nothing to reproach Andres with. Now, when his father would get angry, which could happen after a telephone conversation, he would go to the garage and bang his fists on the punching bag he had hung there. People say that humans get used to everything, and Andres got used to that kind of father, too. But, one day, his mother brought Andres home from school and went to the store because she forgot to buy something. The boy said he wanted to get some rest and fell asleep in his room. He was awakened by the noise and shouting. His heart sank. He thought his father had broken his promise and was hurting his mother again. He ran down the stairs and saw his father beating some man in the living room, kicking him violently in the face and stomach. And the man was no longer screaming or even moaning. Andres frightenedly backed away, ran into his room, and locked the door. A few minutes later, the boy saw through the window as a car pulled up to the house, and two of his father's friends carried the rolled-up rug out of the house, which previously was lying on the living room floor. After a long time, he realized that the body of the man his father had beaten was wrapped up in that rug. And then his mother arrived. She said she had to drive downtown for some shopping. The father was perfectly calm, and the boy said nothing to anyone about what he had accidentally seen. But afterward, every time he heard the slightest noise, he shuddered. Life with his father ended 3 years later. Andres was 10 that day, and his mother had promised to pick him up early from school so she could go to the cake shop to get the cake, but she drove not in her car, and a strange man was with her. "Son, I'm so sorry, but we can't buy cake today," Mom whispered on the way home. "We will celebrate your birthday later, I promise." When they entered the house together, everything was upside down. There were different stuff piled out of closets, dressers, and nightstands. Something was broken, something had been torn. But his mother looked indifferently at this mess. And the man did not leave. He remained sitting on the couch in the living room. The next morning the mother said that the father died. She hugged her son and sobbed. The boy knew that she sobbed not from grief, but from relief. He did not go to school that day, so the two of them went to a cake shop where they tasted a variety of cakes. Andres was happy he would never see his father again, but now he was back. On Sunday morning, Marina got up early. She had a bad dream, but she forgot it as soon as she opened her eyes. She could have stayed in bed, but the day before she planned to do a lot of things. She leisurely took a shower, got dressed, and came down from the second floor of her house to the kitchen, where she immediately began to cook breakfast for herself and her son Andres. He usually got up later on Sundays, but this time, he came into the kitchen as soon as she had finished cooking the omelet. She was surprised that her son was going somewhere on Sunday, even though he didn't look cheerful. "Are you going somewhere?" "Yes, I have a meeting." "On your day off?" "Yes, an important client, so I said yes." "I have a lot to do today, too." Marina took off her apron, which covered her dress. "Are you going to eat?" "No, and I won't have coffee either." Andres kissed her on the cheek. "I don't want to be late." When her son left, Marina sat down at the table. Some kind of anxiety was rising inside her, but she could not understand the reason for it. After all, everything in their lives was going well. She has a successful business, and her adult son is building his own career and is going to marry a nice girl. Maybe even Marina will get married to a man she has known for many years. But what was wrong? What was the reason for this stupid premonition of impending disaster? And then she remembered her nightmare. She saw a man who had died many years ago but had managed to make her life unbearable while he was alive. It seemed that he was forever forgotten because so many years had passed. But the dream brought her back to a past that she didn't want to remember. Marina was 15 when, after graduating from high school, she left the village for the city and enrolled in a sewing school. Her mother didn't mind. After all, by knowing how to sew, you can always earn some money. And when her daughter went to the city, her mother spent less money on food. After all, her two younger sons were growing up, and times were hard, the crisis. Marina's parents worked on the farm, but things were getting worse there every day. Her mother milked cows, but soon the farm was closed and the cattle were slaughtered. Her father, a tractor driver, often drank moonshine, and they threatened to fire him every day, and they almost didn't pay him any money. Their own home farm helped out, but to sell something you had to grow something. Marina and her brothers weeded beds and fed the animals, and when she learned to sew, it occurred to her mother, let the elder go to sewing school. The girl studied well, learning the basics of tailoring, and was soon taking orders from the village neighbors when she came for the weekend. She could sew a dress in one night. But they often paid with groceries. But her mother was happy about that. She kept something for the whole family and gave something Marina to take to the city. In the sewing workshop of the college, she also had a chance to work for low, but guaranteed wages. By graduation, she had managed to sew bed sheets, men's pants, and jackets. She was satisfied with monotonous work because she could see the result. It was not much money, but it was her own, honestly earned money. Her mother always praised her in front of her brothers, calling her a breadwinner. But her father often drank, and it was better not to get in his way. When he came home very drunk, everyone hid in the rooms. Her mother was almost always in trouble because of him and was not too grieved when her father was found dead in the garage near his tractor. In the year of her majority, Marina received a diploma from a sewing school, but further education was out of the question. She had to work. Her brothers were still in school, and it was not easy for her mother to support them alone. The girl was very happy when she was offered a job at the small company Start, sewing jackets of fashionable compressed fabric. She was also lucky with accommodation. She rented a room from a lonely old lady for a modest fee. So there was enough money to live on and to give to her mother. The owner of the company, Carlos Sierra, a somber 30-year-old man, valued executive seamstresses. Marina was breaking all sewing records. She could sew 3 or 4 synthetic jackets in a day, and the quality was always good. He started paying her bonuses for such work. And then one day Carlos' younger brother, Eduardo, showed up in the sewing room. For some reason, everyone called him the artist. He looked like a foreign movie actor, tall, broad-shouldered, with sharp but accurate facial features and deep brown eyes. He was well-dressed, clean-shaven, and smelling of perfume, and had a fashionable haircut. He looked at the girls at the sewing machines for a long time, until he stopped his gaze on Marina. She blushed at this insistent, frank look as if she had been undressed in the city square. She considered her appearance to be the most ordinary. She had no money for outfits or cosmetics and wore what she sewed herself. She did not go to the hairdressers, always braiding her thick blonde hair. Marina was not spoiled by the attention of the boys. At the sewing school she was nicknamed the prude. The girls who studied with her often spent time in the company of guys. They invited her, but she always refused. It was a lot of work and no time for fun. And she didn't really like anyone. Eduardo immediately embarrassed her with his insistence, immediately brought her a box of expensive chocolates, and invited her to a restaurant. Marina tried to refuse. And her colleague Delia, who sat at the sewing machine next to Marina, said tactlessly that Marina has nothing to wear to go to the restaurant, which is why she refused. Marina blushed a lot with shame, but on the other hand, she decided that it was for the best. Now the brother of the owner would never approach her again. It was not that she didn't like him, there was something strongly attractive about him, some kind of masculine strength, but that was what frightened her. "You're lucky, Marina," Delia said after Eduardo left. "Such a man paid attention to you. He always has money and a fancy car, and he's only 23. I would date him, but I'm too old for him, he likes younger girls." Delia was 25 and had already been married and divorced. Now she was raising a young son alone. But, as she said, she was in constant search of a rich man. Although all the girls dreamed of such a man, but not Marina, she did not rely on men. And she did not think about marriage, not to mention lovers. She had no experience in such matters. Why would Eduardo be interested in such an inexperienced girl, especially if he had money? There are many prettier girls than Marina who would be happy to spend time with him. But a couple of hours later Eduardo brought a big branded package, which contained an expensive dress, shoes, cosmetics, and even underwear. The girl blushed more than ever, and he said that no refusals would be accepted now. He would pick her up in the evening. He already knew her address. That evening Marina's life began to change rapidly, and she did not even try to resist, like a fly caught in the net of a spider and paralyzed by its poison. After the restaurant there was a room in a luxury hotel, and from the wine she drank her fear of Eduardo receded a little. The guy was both insistent and gentle, both rough and tender, and Marina seemed to be carried along by the current of a turbulent river. In the morning her man said that she would not return to the shabby room where she lived. He had an apartment where she could now live with him. And she would not have to work, because he would take care of her from that day on, he already informed his older brother. When Marina came to the sewing room for her belongings, all the girls, and especially Delia, looked at her with unconcealed envy. Marina visited her mother and brothers in the village more rarely. She said that she found such a job that she was often busy on weekends, but she began to bring more money, and also new clothes for the boys, so her mother was satisfied with it. "Such beautiful outfits, dear." She looked at Marina with admiration. "You look like a queen. I'm so glad you moved to the city. You didn't study for nothing." Her mother didn't know about Eduardo at the time. Marina was in no hurry to tell her, remembering her strict mores, she would certainly not approve of living together before marriage. And the girl thought she was in a fairy tale. They had dinner at a restaurant every night, the fridge was full of delicacies, and the closet was full of new clothes. What did Eduardo do? Where did he get his money and stuff? Marina did not even think about it. She made the apartment they lived in cozy, she learned how to take care of herself and just lived, enjoying the prosperity, finally not worrying about the future. A couple of months later, Eduardo introduced Marina to his friends. They came to a New Year's Eve party at someone's huge house. The day before, he had given Marina a long fur coat and an incredibly beautiful diamond necklace. She wore a floor-length dress and stiletto shoes. "You look wonderful." Eduardo couldn't hide his excitement. "Don't flirt with anyone, I'm jealous." He said it jokingly, and Marina laughed, not knowing how this party would end. When they entered, everyone greeted Eduardo with loud applause. He proudly introduced Marina to his friends, and all eyes were on her. There were other beautiful girls, but everyone kept their eyes on her all night. Marina felt very uncomfortable. She smiled at Eduardo's friends just out of politeness, but when her man went somewhere, one of the guys, whose name Marina didn't remember, tried to hug her. He was very drunk but still strong enough, so the girl could not get rid of his insistent hands. In a moment, that fool was already lying on the floor, knocked down by a punch from Eduardo, who immediately grabbed Marina by the arm and dragged her toward the exit. When they reached the porch, he slapped her in the face and looked at her angrily, clutching her shoulders with a deadly grip. "I told you I am jealous." He shook her frail body, and when he let go, Marina couldn't keep her feet. The heel of her shoe snapped, and the girl fell off the porch into the snow. "It was not my fault." The tears streamed down her cheeks. "I tried to." "You shouldn't have twisted your ass," he shouted. "I can't leave you alone for a minute. Get in the car." He grabbed her hand and pulled her out of the snowdrift. It was the first time. At that time, Marina had not yet realized that the beautiful fairy tale was over. Why did she think that she would not live like her mother? That her man would not only give her wealth, but that he would never hit her? She was so wrong. And then life became like a swing. Up and Eduardo carries her in his arms, talking about love and giving her a lot of presents. Down, he finds an excuse to hit her, humiliate her, and torture her. Marina did not know how each new day could end with Eduardo, whose low, husky voice made her heart flutter, sometimes with love, and more often with fear. More than once she thought of running away from him and even began to collect the money and jewels he generously gave her, hoping that one day she would escape. But she soon realized that she was pregnant. When Eduardo found out, he picked her up in his arms and whirled her around the room. "You are going to give me a son," he rejoiced. "I won't hurt the mommy-to-be. And I know how to keep my word." Marina could not share his joy. "But we're not married. How can I show my belly in the village? My mother won't let me on the doorstep." "We'll get married, but later. I've got a job to do now." Eduardo thought for a moment. "Though, you know, we can celebrate the wedding in your village and we can make the marriage official later. But your mother doesn't need to know about it. Let her think that we have already registered the relationship." Marina did not like such a spectacle, but it was better this way. At least everyone in the village would know that she got married, and no one would ask for papers. When Eduardo and his brother arrived in the village, all the neighbors came to watch. Her mother couldn't believe that they had brought so many gifts. She praised her future son-in-law until the wedding, not suspecting how this celebration would turn out. Eduardo did not spare any money for the dress or for food, gave Marina a big bundle of cash, and said that he would give her as much as she needed. Maybe that's when she should have run away with the money. But now Marina understood that she could not leave her mother and her brothers. This money is not enough for a long time. And the baby is about to come. And what if Eduardo had found her later? What would happen then? She did not even want to think about it. She decided that they would get married. First, they would just perform this show in her home village, and then they would register the relationship. What if the birth of the baby would change Eduardo forever? It seemed to Marina that there were more people in the yard of their house than there were inhabitants in the village. When she got out of the expensive Eduardo's car in a fancy wedding dress, everyone gasped. Marina was smiling happily. Besides the newlyweds, the groom's brother and his wife and 2 friends came from the city. They knew that this was not a real wedding, but all the villagers did not know that, and Marina actually felt like a real bride. She and Eduardo were seated at the head of the table. A huge table, which was assembled from many small ones, took up the whole yard. There were all kinds of delicacies and drinks on the table. Guests were seated. Anyone who didn't have enough space was standing nearby, getting both drinks and food from the table. Toasts were proclaimed. "It's a little early for the animators," someone joked to the guests when they noticed policemen coming into the courtyard. But then the guests realized that they were not animators, but real policemen. Eduardo jumped up when he saw the policeman, but there was nowhere to run. "Eduardo Sierra, you are arrested," one of the uninvited guests in a police uniform proclaimed. "You are charged with extortion, fraud, and attempted murder." "Why couldn't you wait till morning?" Eduardo realized that resistance was pointless. His two friends were also handcuffed. "Depriving me of my wedding night," he added. "You almost took a man's life." All the guests froze with their mouths open, watching this shameful scene for Marina and her whole family. "Marina, honey, you will be taken care of," shouted Eduardo, going out of the gate. The bride could not utter a word. Carlos's wife grabbed her by the arm and led her out of the courtyard. Carlos hurriedly followed them. "No way!" one of the villagers exclaimed, and everyone else started talking. "Dear, who did you marry? You have disgraced us in front of the whole village," the mother wailed as Marina got into the car, crying. At that moment she wanted to die. How could she ever show up in the village again? No one could imagine such a thing. Marina shrank from the memories as if she had lived through that shame again. She got up quickly, went to the mirror, brushed her hair, grabbed her purse, and left the house. She got in her car and headed downtown. She needed to stop by the warehouse to see what was left of the fabrics, and also at the shop. The work never stopped, even on weekends. Routine chores would bring her thoughts back to calm. But no, they went back to the past. Eduardo was convicted and he went to prison for 7 years, but, as he promised, all these years his friends kept an eye on Marina. They brought money and groceries and took her to prison for visits. Marina had to go there twice or even 3 times a year. She felt like a helpless puppet, but she continued to live that way, not just for her son, but because she didn't know how she could change her life. When Carlos Sierra went abroad, Andres was 5, and Marina had to ask her mother to babysit her grandson for a few days while she went to visit Eduardo in prison. After the humiliating wedding, Marina did not show up in the village until that day, but her mother came to see her herself a week later when she needed money. And the daughter gave the necessary sum, and after that, the mother came at least once a month, as if to visit her daughter, but Marina understood that if she did not need the money, she would not come. Her mother did not rebuke her, the silent reproach in her eyes was enough. She used to be proud of her daughter, but now she was ashamed, and that would not change. Marina did not want to leave her son with his grandmother, but she had no choice. She would bring him herself when she dropped off money and gifts for her mother. She would bring him into the house and immediately leave, trying not to meet any of the villagers. When she came to pick him up, he always asked her not to take him to his grandmother's house anymore. This made Marina feel terrible. But when she thought about what would happen when Eduardo returned from prison, she wanted to cry. She did not really want to marry him now. She had given her son her last name, and there was a dash under father on the birth certificate. But Eduardo talked about how they would get married when he was back, and that the father would have to adopt his son. But it never happened, which made Marina especially happy. Back from prison, Eduardo continued his criminal business with his friends, so he had no time left for the wedding. And Marina herself did not even mention it, wishing that he would forget about it. He called her his wife anyway, and she was fine with that. His temper got even tougher. She will never forget those 3 years until fate finally freed her from this torture. Her son saw her suffer, and when Eduardo died, they seemed to be glad. Marina flinched when her cell phone rang. Mario. She smiled and put it on speaker. Honey, I'm on my way to the warehouse and the workshop. How are you? Mar, I'm fine, had breakfast with Benita. Let's meet at the Galaxy when you are free. I'll show you what I got for you. Then let's meet in a couple of hours at our favorite coffee shop by the fountain on the first floor. Deal. Mario disconnected and looked in the mirror. Not so sweet anymore, that's what his daughter would have joked, but not about him. To her, Daddy was the most handsome man in the world. Well, probably not anymore, though. That position has been taken by Andres. God willing, his daughter will tie her fate with him soon. Her father already dreamed of handing Benita over to her husband. Mario himself hoped that his beloved Marina, after the wedding of their children, would agree to become his wife after all. They had known each other for so many years, and he was tired of being just her lover. He wanted to spend his old age as a family man. Did he think, when he first saw this woman, that years later he would dream of marrying her? Of course not. Then his wife Veronica was still alive, and the circumstances weren't right to be romantic. Police Major Mario Rulli was walking quickly down the corridor of the Internal Affairs building to his office when he heard an interrogation going on behind the door. "Tell us everything you know," Ferretti shouted angrily. "I don't know anything," a woman's voice answered quietly. Ferretti interrogated the wife of the criminal, also known as the artist, a racketeer, fraudster, and extortionist. He was also accused of a murder attempt 10 years ago, for which he spent 7 years in prison. When he came back, he started again with renewed vigor, and last night, while trying to escape from the scene of the crime, he severely wounded a police officer, Ferretti's friend. The hot pursuit was unsuccessful. And everyone knows that the more time passes, the less chance to catch the criminal, so they called his wife for questioning, who may know something about his whereabouts. But with this kind of interrogation, it is unlikely that anything can be learned from her. Major Rulli resolutely opened the door of the office. "Ferretti, you can go, I'll continue myself," the head of the investigation department said. Mario Rulli, but... The young officer wanted to object, but immediately stopped when he saw Rulli's menacing gaze. "Got it." He quickly left the office. A frail young woman with slumped shoulders was sitting in a chair. She was wiping tears from her eyes with a handkerchief. Her blonde hair fell to her shoulders, covering her face. Mario Rulli took the papers from the table and quickly looked through them. "Marina Trujillo, I am the head of the investigation department, Major Mario Rulli. Please forgive my young colleague. Your husband seriously injured his close friend. He is in the hospital in serious condition, and there is almost no chance of survival." "But I don't know anything." The woman burst into tears. "I don't know where my husband can be. He never discussed his business with his friends in front of me. Our house had already been searched, and they brought me here right away." Mario poured water into a glass from a decanter and handed it to Marina. She threw her hair back, and he could see her almost childlike face. Pity crept into his heart. How could such a lovely woman be the wife of a dangerous criminal? "I have nothing to add." She calmed down after drinking some water. "Please let me go. I have to pick up my son from school." "Okay, wait for me." He left the office, leaving the door open, and returned a few minutes later, having arranged with his subordinates to set up an ambush at Sierra's house. "I'll take you there." The major helped Marina up. She obediently got up and followed him. "I will stay the night at your house," Mario informed her after picking up Marina's son from school. They entered the house, where everything was turned upside down after the search. "It is possible that your husband might come back. And as you understand, I don't have to ask for permission, it's my job." "Okay." The woman took off her coat and helped her son to take off his shoes. Mario asked if there was any other way out of the house. He walked through the rooms on the first and second floor, checking to see if all the windows were locked, and then came back downstairs. "Coffee?" she asked suddenly. "Sure." Mario sat down on the couch, looking at the living room, connected to the kitchen by an oval archway. It still looked cozy, despite the mess. "Andres, go to your room, change your clothes, and come back for dinner." Marina seemed calm, apparently trying to get her life back on track with her usual actions. Among the dishes displayed in the closet, she found a coffee pot and took out a bag of coffee from the drawers, where, as elsewhere, everything was lying out of place. And her hands were shaking badly. "Let me help you." Mario stood up and took the coffee pot away from Marina, and she collapsed onto the chair as if she had lost all her strength. What if her husband entered the house now? The woman seemed more exhausted than frightened. "There is a car outside with my assistants. You're not going to do anything stupid, are you?" "No, but he." "If Eduardo Sierra shows up, don't try to help him, you'll only make things worse for yourself." "I don't want to see him anymore. I want to forget him like a nightmare. You have no idea what a nightmare my life with him has been since his return from prison." "I'm sorry to hear that." Mario took a cup from the mountain of dishes and poured coffee. "Why didn't you leave him?" "How?" "It was impossible. During the 7 years he was in prison, his friends kept an eye on me. I never had a chance to run away with the baby. But if I had known how my life would turn out when he came back, I would probably have risked, for my son's sake." She cried again. "Mom, all my stuff is scattered around in my room." A boy came into the kitchen. "I know, dear." Marina hugged her son. "I'll clean up, and you eat and go do your homework." She moved the dishes to the side, took a pot out of the fridge, and put it on the stove. Mario returned to the couch with his cup. He could hear Marina talking to the kid. She sounds like a good mother. And judging by the atmosphere in the house, she's a great housewife. "Why did you bind your life to such a man? Because of money or because of great love?" He didn't know why he asked this question when Marina returned after she had put her son to the bed. "How can you judge me? What do you know about me?" "Nothing, that's why I asked. I was 18 when we met. I had no idea what kind of person he was. And when I figured it out, it was too late. And now I have a son. Then Sierra's arrest is in your best interest. If you know anything about where he is now, you could help with the investigation. We'll be able to catch him sooner, and he'll get the punishment he deserves. And then he'll come back from prison to me. And the whole time he's in prison, his friends will be watching me. I've been through this before. There are only 3 people left of his criminal gang, including himself. And we can arrest them all. They'll all go to prison. So there won't be anyone to watch you. I really want to help you, but I don't know how." "When your husband left, where did he usually go? Did he say anything about making an appointment on the phone?" "Sometimes he'd say, 'Let's go to Bruno's,' or 'I'll meet you at Bruno's,' but I don't know who he was." "Wait a minute," Mario stood up. "Where's the phone?" He quickly dialed the number of the police department. "Send a SWAT team to Bruno's restaurant." "Yeah, outside of the city. Sierra could be there." That night, Sierra's burnt-out car was found outside a suburban restaurant. The bodies of 2 men were found inside. The medical examiner concluded that one of them could be Sierra and the other was his accomplice. Sergio Magana, the last surviving and still free member of the Sierra gang, was arrested the next day, but the case against him collapsed for lack of evidence and he was released. Mario had several other difficult cases before he retired, but Sierra's case was the most memorable, probably because of his wife Marina, a poor frightened woman. He met her again 7 years after, at the premiere of a play at a local theater. Mario was with his 15-year-old daughter Benita. He tried to spend more time with her after his wife died of breast cancer 2 years ago. Back then, Mario was still working for the Ministry of the Interior, reaching the position of Deputy Director of Operations, DAO. But later he got a job in the security service of a commercial bank. Marina came there with her grown-up son Andres, and the former investigator did not immediately recognize her. The contrast between the poor tired woman and this bright and confident beauty was too striking. It was strange, but for some reason, both were glad of this unexpected meeting. They discussed the play like old acquaintances, and Mario thought it appropriate to invite Marina and her son to a cafe to continue the evening together. Benita and Andres just shrugged their shoulders shyly, but later they began to communicate. That's how their friendship began, and over the years it developed into romance. And now Andres and Benita had decided to get married. Mario also hoped that he would be able to persuade Marina to become his wife. He looked at engagement rings in the jewelry store at the Galaxy Mall and wanted Marina's approval before he bought them, but first, he needed her consent. At 9:45, Andres sat down at a table in a French coffee shop on the second floor of the Galaxy Mall. The waiter brought him coffee, but this usually delicious drink seemed too bitter for him today. He put another teaspoon of sugar in the cup and looked at his watch. At 10 o'clock, a tall man, dressed in a checkered jacket over a black sweater with a high collar, walked up to his table. His dark hair was pulled back in a ponytail and covered with a gray beret. A goatee and expensive glasses with slightly tinted lenses completed the picturesque image. He carried a leather shoulder bag and a neatly rolled-up raincoat and an elegant walking stick in his hand. He looked like a painter or a musician. The man pulled a chair across from Andres, sat down, and waved to the waitress. "French coffee, please, and a dessert to your taste," said the man in a husky bass voice, and Andres immediately recognized the voice. "Good morning, son," the pretentiously dressed father addressed him. "Don't stare at me this way. I didn't recognize you. I guess you don't know anything about me, otherwise you wouldn't be surprised. I have a nickname, the artist, for a reason. I'm a master of transformation. But I guess nobody told you about that. I don't have time now to talk about it. Maybe I'll get the chance later, but now let's get down to business. How can I help you?" "I have no idea," Andres began. "You don't need any idea. All you have to do is follow my instructions. You were good at obeying me when you were a kid, and this will come in handy now." "What made you so sure I wouldn't go to the police?" "Well, you didn't." Sierra grinned. "For the sake of your beloved, dear mother, you will help me, and I will disappear from your life again. And you can support yourself for the rest of your life, yourself and your future family. Can't you get revenge on everyone you want without my help? It would be easier to do it with you, and it's much more interesting. I like to play. Besides, my voice is too recognizable. I can't keep pretending to be mute. I can change my appearance, but not my voice." The waiter brought coffee and croissants. "This mall was built with my money, just like the rest of Sergio Magaña's business." When his father took the cup, Andres noticed an expensive watch on his wrist and a ring with a large black stone on his finger. "Because of him, I had to pretend to be dead for 2 decades, as if I were burned alive. He was my best friend, and now he's my worst enemy. That's where we start." "Is there anyone else you intend to take revenge on?" "Yes, there's the investigator who once imprisoned me. When I came back, I didn't have time to pay him off. He was promoted to deputy director of operations. Now, I think, he's already retired. But I haven't even figured out how to punish him more elegantly." The fake artist laughed. "And what's this investigator's name?" "Mario Rulli. I am glad that you are already interested in the details of our common case." He patted Andres on the shoulder, but Andres turned pale when he heard the familiar name. "I still don't understand. How can I help you?" Andres tried to pull himself together and calm down so that his father would not suspect him of anything. Apparently, the father didn't know that his son and wife were friends with his enemy. "Please, stop saying the same thing so boringly," the artist grimaced. "Try to imagine that we are just enjoying French coffee on a Sunday morning, like father and son who met after a long separation." Andres couldn't share his father's high spirits. He would never have come face to face with him willingly, but now things were much worse than he had anticipated. This criminal was going to take revenge on his fiancée's father and his mother's close friend in some way. Are you even listening to me? Andres realized that he was immersed in thoughts and missed what his interlocutor was saying. We're going to do it tomorrow with Magana. He won't suspect the priest of anything, I'm sure of that. Here are the papers, have a look at them tonight. And be ready to have them notarized tomorrow. Meet me in the lobby of the Capitol Business Center at noon. Eduardo Sierra took the folder out of his bag and handed it to Andres. He clapped him on the shoulder and headed for the exit. Marina walked through the Galaxy Mall to the coffee shop by the fountain where they had arranged to meet with Mario. Suddenly she heard a hoarse, low voice behind her. Please, after you. She looked around frightened, afraid of seeing the man from the past, but she saw the tall man standing with his back to her, wearing a gray beret and his hair pulled back in a ponytail. He gallantly let the girl into the elevator cabin. Marina immediately scolded herself for being too paranoid and headed to the escalator. As she had expected, Mario was already sitting at a table at their favorite coffee shop, but he looked nervous. He got up when he saw her and moved toward her. We have to get out of here. What happened? Aren't we even going to have coffee? Marina was surprised. Not here and not now. Mario took her under the elbow and, after looking around, led her to the side exit of the mall. Can you explain anything to me? Marina said anxiously. Later. Mario drove out of the parking lot in a hurry. I'll take you to the hotel, you have to stay there until tomorrow. Mario, are you going to play spy games? Marina tried to joke, although she was really scared. Just trust me. And what about my job? You can sort it out on the phone. Mario drove Marina to a hotel owned by his friend. The receptionist immediately handed him the keys, and he walked Marina to the right door. Please, don't go anywhere. Order whatever you need in the room. I'll visit you in the evening. Marina sat down on the wide bed in total confusion. What on earth is going on? During all the time they had known each other, Mario had never behaved as he did today. What could have happened? What was he trying to protect her from? What could possibly threaten her? All the bad things in her life were associated with only one person, and he had been dead for a long time. There, she thought of him again, though she must admit that she had inherited some good things from Sierra. First of all, her son Andres, her joy, the meaning of her life, her hope, and support. It's a good thing he's nothing like his father. Secondly, the house that she and Andres still live in was bought for her by Eduardo. He said that he didn't want to get involved with buying real estate, but in general, it was a gift for Marina for having waited faithfully for him for 7 years while he was in prison. As if she had any other options under the constant control of his friends. But she thought she deserved both the house and what she later found in the garden. A year after Eduardo's death, she decided to replant the young tree that he, as if on purpose, had poorly planted in the first days after they moved into their new home. The apple tree was dying as if its roots lacked nutrition and moisture. Andres was at school when she started the operation to save the apple tree. There was a leather bag full of money buried under the roots of the tree. At this point, it became clear why the tree was dying. Marina decided not to look for a new place for it, but only removed what prevented the growth of its roots. She walked into the house with the bag, unable to decide what to do with the money. Should she give it to the investigators? But no one had asked her about any money, and if she let them know, there would be a lot of questions. What if they initiate another search or even start tearing down the walls in search of hiding places? And she decided to keep the money for herself and her son. After that, she started her own business. And to make sure no one suspected anything, she took out a loan from the bank, just in case. But the cost of buying premises, equipment, and materials, not to mention the salaries for seamstresses, exceeded the loan amount many times over, but no one checked it. And this was the third gift from Sierra, posthumous. Since her first profit, Marina began making donations to charities and later became one of the founders of the Hope City Shelter for women who found themselves in difficult circumstances, including domestic violence. And for all these years, her contributions have long exceeded the amount in the bag found under the roots of the apple tree. Opening a sewing shop was a significant new life milestone for Marina. She finally felt not only like a free spirit, but a talented entrepreneur who could help others. Not surprisingly, her small business was thriving, and the question of expanding it had long been on the agenda. Now Marina was negotiating the purchase of new premises for a second shop. And the most experienced seamstresses taught their craft to women who lived in the Hope Shelter and did not have any education and skills or just wanted to learn to be seamstresses. Marina made a few calls, confirming tomorrow's appointment with a salesman scheduled for the afternoon. Mario said she should stay at the hotel until tomorrow, which meant she wouldn't have to cancel it. She waited for him to show up and explain everything, but towards evening she got a message from him that he would not be able to come and they would see each other only tomorrow. Marina fell asleep, thinking about the technologist's suggestion to expand the product line of children's products, and that night she was not disturbed by dreams. At noon, a tall, broad-shouldered priest with a beard and a thick mustache entered the lobby of the Capitol Business Center. He wore a white cassock and a hat. Behind the small round glasses, his slightly squinting eyes were scrutinizing the surroundings, as if examining every detail. He held the cross he wore over his cassock. And when an old woman in a long dress suddenly appeared out of nowhere and asked for a blessing, the priest said, "God bless you in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit." And the woman touched his hand with her lips. Andres, who watched this scene, forgot the reason he was in the business center for a moment, because the priest looked so vivid, and he didn't seem to fit in a building full of medium and large company offices. However, he didn't expect to see any religious women there either. Meanwhile, the priest walked straight toward him. Andres even looked around to see who he was looking at so intently. "You didn't recognize me again, my son," the priest said in a husky bass voice. Unexpectedly. That's all Andres could say, surprised by what he saw. "Are you a priest? Are you out of your mind? I am an artist, the king of transformation. So such an outfit fits my voice perfectly. But it's gonna be you who's going to do all the talking. Ready?" "Sure, I'm ready." Andres raised his right hand. The security guards and policemen in uniform quickly approached them from several directions. The handcuffs were snapped on the wrists of Sierra, who had no time to come to his senses. He was still dressed as a priest. "My son, you are Judas," said the indignant fake priest, not breaking out of the image. "I did not expect this from you. You ratted out your father to the cops, so how are you going to live with that now?" Happily. Andres wasn't embarrassed. "I'll visit you in jail." When they took Sierra out of the building, Mario came up to Andres. "You did the right thing." "I know." After Sierra's arrest, Mario took Marina out of the hotel. "Now can you tell me what's going on?" She tried to be calm, but she didn't succeed. "Your dead husband showed up, but he's already in custody." "So it was him I saw yesterday at the Galactica?" "Yeah, he was meeting Andres there." "How's my son? Is he okay?" "No, he helped with the arrest. Yesterday he called me and we met at the mall where he told me that Sierra was planning revenge against Magana and me. I decided it would be safer for you to spend the night away. I contacted my old colleagues. We pulled up the archive file of Sierra, who managed to sneak out of the mall. Colleagues worked out a plan to arrest him during their meeting with Andres today. My son took such a risk." Marina was horrified. Sierra could have had a gun. "Yes, but luckily there was no shooting. Though he had a gun, he didn't have time to use it. He probably didn't expect his son to betray him. What's gonna happen to him now?" "He wanted revenge on Magana, but it is not yet clear how. But for me, the most important thing is that you are safe. Mario looked fondly at Marina. And where has he been for 20 years? That remains to be found out. The same evening they learned that Eduardo Sierra had died in a prison cell. At the autopsy, it turned out that a blood clot had ruptured. Marina asked to participate in the autopsy. This time she wanted to be sure that this man would never come back into her life. Marina invited her mother and brothers to Andres and Benita's wedding. One of the brothers had settled in the city, and the other was farming in the countryside. Both married and raised children, neither of them followed in their father's footsteps, and neither of them suffered from drunkenness. What a beautiful wedding! Her mother hugged Marina, saying goodbye. You have raised your son to be a good man, educated him, and arranged his marriage. Maybe now you can organize your personal life, too? Mother looked meaningfully at Mario. People in the village do not remember your previous wedding. You can come and visit me more often. Marina used her mother's invitation for the next weekend. She walked through the village with Mario, without any embarrassment. She greeted everyone they met on their way and introduced them to her husband. The day before, they had received their marriage certificate. Andres Trujillo, a notary, was finishing his workday by looking over at a photo of his wife Benita with a newborn son in her arms. How many more people are there? He asked his assistant Irene when she came into the office. There is no one else, she answered with a satisfied smile. Good. Andres wanted to get home as soon as possible to hug his wife and hold his son in his arms.
If you're enjoying it as well, leave a like and subscribe.